Look at the top or near the top of any workplace skills and demand list, and you'll see it sitting there. Something so common, something we all do all day, every day, and yet something so few of us truly excel at. What is it? Problem solving. A study conducted by the American Management Association indicates that 70% of executives say that problem solving and associated critical thinking are the most important skills organizations need to grow. So, those who are really good at it increase their value to their organization and their attractiveness to potential hiring personnel. They're able to increase productivity, efficiency, sales, and profits and achieve just about any organizational goal. They become the person everyone wants on their team because they are so good at adapting and overcoming. And what makes great problem solvers so good at solving problems might surprise you. It's their habits. I'm leadership and self-leadership expert Scott Moutz, and in this course, you'll learn the habits of the best problem solvers, informed by research with over 3,000 executives labeled as great problem solvers by their peers. This insight is blended with classic habit-building science, so you can develop your own tailored routine, your own problem-solving habits. As a result, you will consistently be better equipped to solve problems effectively. So, join me in my course, 10 Habits of Great Problem Solvers. It's a solution for success. Guess what the biggest problem is in solving problems? When you don't have a disciplined approach to doing so, when you just go on gut or wing it without any real process. This video and the next 5 lay out a powerful problem-solving framework that incorporates key habits of great problem solvers. I call this framework the problem-solving eye. It's represented by the visual of an eye, with the eyebrow being the overarching mindset required to be a great problem solver, and the shape of the eye representing each of the habits or steps along the way, which go from narrow in scope to broad, then back to narrow. We'll go through each, one at a time, starting with the mindset. Being a great problem solver starts with a specific mindset and making a habit of it. First, believe you can solve the problem. Never give in to a defeatist attitude. And don't just focus on the pressure you're under or the consequences of not solving the problem. Focus on how rewarding it will feel when you have the solution, even if you have to compromise. When you experience setbacks, instead of saying, "we failed," say, "not yet." In other words, just because you didn't solve the problem yet doesn't mean you'll never solve it. For example, James Dyson developed over 5,000 prototypes before successfully creating the first bagless vacuum cleaner. By the way, it also helps to recall problems you solved in the past to drive conviction that you will once again. Next, be ready to put in the work. How will you know when you and your team are ready? When you can answer yes to the following questions. Do I accept that I don't or won't know everything that I'd like to know to solve this problem? Do I believe I can figure things out along the way? Do I understand I don't have to go it alone? Will I resist labeling opinions and biases as facts? Will I resist quick fix solutions based on shallow understanding? Answer yes to all these questions, and you're ready to dig in, to do the hard work it takes to solve a problem at a deeper level. Said another way, I know a CEO fond of saying, solutions that work come when you're ready to work. Next up, be flexible. When you approach problem solving with a flexible mindset, it helps you adapt to the challenge at hand. 3 types of flexibility are needed. Intellectual flexibility. This means keeping an open mind, resisting typical thinking to consider creative solutions, being willing to challenge assumptions, and knowing when you need to dig deeper and learn more to be able to solve the problem. You also need emotional flexibility, meaning not getting too emotionally attached to one potential solution or overly emotional about the problem itself in a way that negatively influences the solution, such as rushing to implement a fix or overcorrecting for the problem. Finally, dispositional flexibility. This means being inclined, or having the disposition, to enjoy the process of problem solving, being willing to improvise and experiment as needed, and being receptive to change that might be required to solve the problem. Finally, attack the problem, not the person. You solve nothing when you focus your energy on blaming and finger pointing. Great problem solvers address the problem, not undress the person behind the problem. There will always be time later on to productively learn from who did or didn't do what. So set the tone by getting into solution mode and bypassing slamming mode. For example, say a salesperson lost a key customer by not being responsive enough. First priority is to focus on winning that customer back. Later, you can diagnose what the salesperson did wrong and what can be learned from it. With a proper overarching mindset in place, let's look to the left corner of the problem-solving eye now in the next video. The next important step of problem solving is admitting you have a problem in the first place. This step is highlighted in the lower left corner of the problem-solving eye. It sounds simple, right? But one client of mine conducted a study that showed in their organization, for every 10 problems the organization addressed, 7 of them were initially ignored or rejected as an issue. In other words, 70% of the time, people weren't admitting there was a problem, or at least not fast enough. Now, I don't know the situation in your organization, but I bet the percentage might not be too far off. We can do better as leaders and must. All too often, I've personally witnessed the damaging impact of not admitting or ignoring issues, just hoping they'll go away. For example, more than once, I've seen a leader deploy an organizational culture survey. They get the responses, then explain away the bad results afterwards. Or worse yet, never share the results, rather than openly admitting that issues exist and working to address them. Toxic. Now that said, it's easy to fall into the static trap. It starts with denying that a problem exists, being static, doing nothing about it, until it can no longer be ignored. Then we create static or distortion around the problem by making excuses about why the problem exists, downplaying its impact, or redirecting attention by finger pointing. At the same time, while we've admitted the problem exists, we still haven't put our energy towards doing something about it. We remain static versus taking action. You make a habit of avoiding the static trap by cutting it off at the start, by recognizing the signs of denial and moving quickly into admission and action mode instead. These signs include refusing to talk or even think about the problem, or continually putting it off. Minimizing the negative impact that's occurring to make it seem like less of a problem, like when you tell yourself you don't need to fire that abrasive employee you personally like because they aren't really causing that much of an issue with the team. Justifying why the problem is happening to make it seem like less of a problem. And blaming and finger pointing, denying any ownership of the problem. So, move from ignoring or distorting to admitting, then you're ready to define the problem in the next video. Albert Einstein said, if I had an hour to solve a problem, I'd spend 55 minutes thinking about the problem, 5 minutes thinking about solutions. Steve Jobs said, if you define the problem correctly, you almost have the solution. Moving to the right in the problem-solving eye, we properly define the problem. As indicated by the two quotes, it's about habitually being disciplined enough to identify the real problem so you're solving for the right thing versus rushing into solution mode. Not easy to do, as a study of over 100 C-suite executives showed that 85% of them agreed that their organization was poor at clearly defining or diagnosing problems, with 87% of them saying this flaw carried significant costs. To properly diagnose a problem, identify the problem's root cause using the 5 whys analytical approach, invented by Seikichi Toyota and first used in the Toyota automobile production system. The idea is to ask 5 times in a row why a problem occurred. The root cause of the problem will typically emerge by the 5th why, or maybe even before that. For example, say you're trying to solve the problem of an ineffective online marketing campaign. To get to the root cause of the problem, you ask, why? Repeatedly, like so. Why is the campaign ineffective? Well, because we're spending too much to get too little in return. Well, why is that? Because very few people are engaging with the ad. Why is that? Because the ads aren't persuasive or even relevant to the target audience. Why is that? Because we didn't understand the target audience's needs clearly enough. And why is that? Because we don't prioritize deep understanding of the consumer and customer. And there's your root cause of the problem. By the way, you can combine the 5 whys analysis with the Pareto principle, which, when applied to problem solving, says that 80% of problems come from 20% of the causes of problems. Meaning, start getting to the root cause of a problem by first considering the typical causes of your problems. Now, because defining the problem is so important, here's another creative option altogether. Problem reframing, made popular by author Thomas Wettlesborg. It's about finding a better problem to solve versus identifying the root cause. Here's an example the author shared that I really like. Let's say you're a building owner and tenants are complaining about a slow elevator. Through root cause analysis, you determine that you can A, replace the elevator, B, upgrade the motor, or C, improve the algorithm that runs the elevator. Instead, a clever friend suggests that you add music to the lift, install a hand sanitizer dispenser, and add mirrors so that people can pass time by looking at themselves. And bingo, you just reframe the problem from the lift is too slow to the wait is annoying, and then solve that problem instead by making it less annoying. Oh, and by the way, in a much cheaper way. Now notice, the original solutions could have worked too, replacing the lift, etc. But through a different understanding of the problem, you uncover better, easier solutions. To engage in problem reframing, use these questions or statements. Ask, what's a different, better problem to solve that still accomplishes our end goal? Start the problem reframing session by using this fill-in-the-blank statement. The problem is not that blank, it's that blank. Ask, what category of problem are we facing? Is it a people problem, incentive problem, a software problem, a lack of training problem? Ask, what was different at a time when this problem didn't exist? Note that bringing in outsiders, people not as close to the issue, to input on any of these questions can help, by the way. So, now we go from definition to divergence in the next video. If I asked you to brainstorm as many ways as you can for brainstorming ideas, how many would you come up with? Probably a lot, based on the fact that there are already hundreds of brainstorming techniques out there. Well, you'll need to pick the methods you like best for the center of the problem-solving eye, because this is where you diverge, making a habit of generating a host of possible solutions to a problem. Thus, the scope and focus are at their broadest in the eye. Now, I won't select any one brainstorming method over the other, but I do want to share the 3 most important general principles for brainstorming and diverging. First, stop self-monitoring. It's critical when brainstorming and diverging to turn off your self-monitoring brain. Doing so maximizes creativity, as a study from the National Institutes of Health showed. In the study, freestyle rap artists were asked to perform both well-rehearsed and improvised numbers, while their brain activity was measured. While creatively improvising and riffing, the part of the artist's brain known to be the judging, self-monitoring part was virtually shut down. In other words, for many daily activities, it's important to self-monitor, so you don't just blurt out everything you think. But when it comes to maximizing creativity, it's essential to let the ideas flow and not let the judging part of your inner dialogue get in the way. To help, here's a simple trick. If you catch yourself judging ideas while brainstorming, quickly say to yourself, flow, not no. It creates awareness of the self-monitoring autopilot that can switch on inside of all of us, instead encouraging you to just let the ideas flow. Next, optimize your open-mindedness. Now, this is related to the prior point, but worthy of its own consideration. While you want everyone at a brainstorming session locked in and ready to fully participate, of course, you don't want them locked in or fixated on one particular area of ideas. It's critical to remain open-minded to invite in all the possibilities that could surface. An experiment from the University of Hertfordshire illustrates this point. In this study, people were asked to count the number of pictures in a newspaper. Most completed the task within minutes and reported that there were 43 photos, which was correct. However, they were all so locked in on the task in front of them that no one noticed two key prompts. Large type on the second page that read, "Stop counting. There are 43 photographs in this newspaper." Or even better, the second prompt that said, "Stop counting. Tell the experimenter that you've seen this and win $250. Both instructions went unnoticed until after the researchers asked the respondents to go back through the newspaper to see if they spotted anything unusual. Now, the study showed that when we get tunnel vision locked in on our perspective, we can miss opportunities right in front of us. Finally, honor everyone's input. Just as you want to resist judging your own ideas too quickly when brainstorming, resist criticizing other ideas as well, other people's ideas that is, or at least resist offering criticism without respectfully, constructively building on their idea to improve it. For example, Disney's Pixar group follows a process called plussing. Criticism of an idea must be accompanied with a suggestion for making it better, a plus. Otherwise, keep it to yourself. Further honor everyone's brainstorming input by having a good method for capturing every idea so people feel heard. If they don't feel heard, nothing shuts down ideation faster. That's divergence. Now it's time to converge with what comes next. What's worse than having no choice in a matter? Having too much choice. That's why, as you move further to the right of the problem-solving eye, you converge and narrow down the number of solution options. To do so, invoke classic creative problem-solving technique, which, at its core, requires balancing convergent and divergent thinking. A few key principles to keep in mind in this phase. First, have your criteria in cement, meaning in advance of brainstorming potential solutions, have a firm set of evaluation criteria in place so you can determine which ideas make the cut for final consideration. For example, you can evaluate a list of ideas based on feasibility of execution, how fast the idea can be implemented, originality or innovativeness, ideas with the most upside, scalability or profitability, or ideas that are the best fit with organizational goals. You might even have a more emotional evaluation criteria, such as exciting enough to motivate us through all the challenges it will present. Next, have the evaluators identified. Who gets to vote on the ideas? Some groups use power dotting, where everybody gets to vote and does so by voting for ideas written on a list, by placing a circular sticker next to their favorite ideas. The ideas with the most votes win. Other groups gather all the ideas and have a smaller group, often consisting of key leaders. They decide on which ideas will move forward. And there are plenty of iterations in between. The point is, know who gets the deciding votes. This prevents a chaotic end to a brainstorming session where whoever is loudest or most passionate ends up dictating what ideas and solutions win, which leaves participants feeling frustrated and even played. Finally, compare, contrast, combine. It's also helpful to compare and contrast the ideas on your list, looking for ways to combine or group them thematically for simplification. For example, say you notice several ideas all center on a similar theme, improving the appeal of your company's core product line. It becomes a major theme you converge on. You might even choose to prototype the idea finalists to further narrow options down. Now, of course, at this point, you can and should discard entire groups of ideas or single ideas that simply aren't attractive enough. Let's converge one step further to the final phase in the next video. Okay, you're at the last stage of problem solving now, where you've narrowed down your potential options and must now commit to one solution or a course of action. This stage is highlighted on the far right side of the problem-solving eye. Now, it's important here not to overthink it, constantly revisiting your options. It's easy to fall into this trap because when you keep rehashing options over and over, it feels like you're problem solving, doing something useful. But you're not. You're just spinning. Overthinking and problem solving are not the same thing. It's also important to remember at this final stage of the framework to invoke a habit I call the law of commitment, which has two parts. First, debate, decide, commit. Once you've debated and then selected a solution, everyone on the team should commit to its execution as if it was their own idea. Now, this isn't as easy as it sounds. Here's an example I've seen happen about 100 times. You're in a meeting where the leader shares a solution he or she wants executed, but not everyone agrees and no one speaks up. Afterwards, some of those meeting participants engage in a meeting after the meeting, where people share their true feelings about the solution chosen and start feeling doubts about the call that was made. Well, that leads to half-hearted execution of the solution, and ultimately, there's a good chance the solution chosen won't work. None of this is helpful. So, it's critical to encourage open debate from all the stakeholders. Then make the call and ask everyone to commit to the decision. The second half of the law of commitment says, create commitment, not compliance. The idea here is to create and maintain momentum for the chosen solution in a way that actually encourages the expenditure of discretionary energy to execute it well. You do this by ensuring stakeholders feel three specific things regarding a solution: safe, involved, and accountable. For instance, say you've decided to solve your organization's poor performance issue by instituting mandatory training. Now, you could just announce it and then expect people to comply or suffer the consequences. Or you could have a plan to create commitment to the solution, ensuring stakeholders feel safe, involved, and accountable as follows. You'll make them feel safe with the solution by continually touting the benefits they'll get from the training, the skills they'll build, and by continually reinforcing why this solution is the best one and won't bring them harm. Here, you can ask yourself, what will make people feel safe about this solution? You'll make stakeholders feel involved by enrolling them in the design of the training, getting their feedback and acting on it. Ask yourself, how can I get people maximally involved in implementing this solution? You'll make them feel accountable by putting clear measurements in place so everyone will know if the solution, mandatory training, is working or not. Here you ask yourself, how can I ensure people feel accountable to deliver the solution successfully? So, that's each stage of the problem-solving I framework. Now you can I more success when it comes to problem solving. What makes problem solving problematic? Well, it's the nature of it. Problems cause pain and work as the solution likely isn't apparent, otherwise it wouldn't be a problem. The process is also prone to errors and biases that can undermine the results, especially given that problem solving usually happens under some amount of pressure. But great problem solvers make a habit of mindfully avoiding common problem-solving mistakes. The mistake matrix will help you do the same. Problem-solving mistakes are best considered on two specific fronts. What level of impact does the mistake have, measured on the matrix from low impact to high impact? And how difficult is it to prevent the mistake, from low difficulty to high difficulty? Problem-solving mistakes of the first degree, those with the highest negative impact, lie here and are your biggest priority to avoid. Well, other than not following the problem-solving I framework as discussed previously in this course, that would be a huge mistake. Let's discuss these top two quadrants and what to do accordingly, starting here, with high negative impact mistakes that are the easiest to prevent. First, going it alone. Not asking for help in solving problems is a big mistake with high negative impact. That is, it's highly preventable. While, yes, it can be hard at times, of course, to ask for help, remember that while self-reliance is admirable, it can also be self-limiting. Asking for help is a sign of wisdom, not weakness. Next, reinventing the wheel. Meaning, you don't learn from the past, solving problems in a vacuum as if it were the first time you were facing a problem like it. It's an incredibly inefficient use of resources and can only add to the time it takes to solve a problem. Borrowing brilliance is okay, especially from the past, from solutions that have worked. So, as you problem solve, review past approaches to solving that problem. Next up, not rewarding successful problem solving is not good. Eventually, people won't want to engage in problem solving, which can be exhausting to begin with. Be sure to celebrate successful solutions. Finally, in this quadrant, not measuring progress for an implemented solution is a big mistake. You won't know fast enough if the problem has been solved. But it's easy to fix with some planning and alignment to ensure measurements are in place. The next quadrant is mistakes that are costly but hard to prevent. While difficulty is involved, the return is well worth the effort. First here, giving up when things get hard. Devastating because by definition, the problem goes unsolved, and hard because, well, it's hard. Key here is committing to just keep going. For example, the CEO of an idea incubation company told me the number one factor that discerns companies who successfully innovate and solve problems is that they commit to simply keep going when most others would stop. They know the best solution is rarely the easiest solution. Next, incrementalism is a big problem in problem solving. Sticking close to what's been done before, going for a solution that's only marginally 10% better versus 10 times better. But entrenchment is not a great strategy for creative problem solving. Breakthrough is hard, which makes accepting incrementalism too easy. Don't fall into this problem solving trap. Lastly, it's a huge mistake when you refuse to acknowledge the solution isn't working, especially if you have new information or context that changes the validity of the solution. Not only have you not really solved the problem, now you're wasting time in getting back to finding a solution. It's hard to prevent this mistake because of your ego, fear of looking bad, or admitting failure. But remember that it's not who's right, it's what's right. It's also hard to acknowledge a failed solution when you've already invested so much time in it. It's known as the sunk cost fallacy. But great problem solvers don't fall for this, believing instead that the effort required to find a better solution is independent from past effort. All that matters is creating a better future path. Let's take a look at the bottom half of the mistake matrix and what to do about it in the next video. Now let's focus on the bottom half of the mistake matrix with relatively lower impact problem-making mistakes. Let's start here with low-impact mistakes that are highly preventable. It's a mistake to not step away from the problem-solving process every now and then versus continuing to press on through exhaustion. When I say it's a mistake with low impact, I mean that relative to other problem-solving mistakes we've covered. It could still be a considerable issue because it directly affects the quality and efficiency of the problem-solving effort. That's why it's at the higher end of this low-impact quadrant. To prove the point, think of the opposite. Ever notice when you're working hard to solve a problem, if you step away from it for a while and go think about anything else? When you come back to the problem, the solution often quickly materializes. Research published in the journal Psychological Science shows that stepping away from a problem and letting your mind wander on unrelated topics ultimately yields more creative problem solving when you return to the problem. For example, I used to work a lot with creatives at advertising agencies. The creatives consistently told me when they were under pressure to hit a deadline, they'd take a break from the project. The best ideas came to them not when they were working in their offices, straining to ideate, but when they were taking in a Broadway show or a stand-up comedy act and not even thinking about the problem to be solved. They'd get a spark of an idea, and when they returned to thinking about the problem, creativity blossomed. As further confirmation of this phenomenon, Hollywood director and producer John Montgomery told me in an interview, "It only takes 1 minute to come up with a brilliant solution. I just don't know when I'll have it in the next month." Also in this quadrant, catastrophizing the extent of problem is not helpful. In fact, it's the opposite of not admitting you have a problem. It's making a problem bigger than it really is. That said, it's a relatively low-impact problem-solving issue because its primary cost is simply distracting people somewhat from working on real problems. Now, it can easily be avoided, though, through a habit of objectively, without emotion, evaluating the severity of new issues as they arise. The final quadrant are mistakes that have a low impact and are hard to prevent. Just one thing to point out here. The mistake of second-guessing the chosen solution is relatively low impact in regards to solving the problem itself, because it's after the fact. The solution is already in place. And if you follow the problem-solving I framework, you know it's a well-thought-through solution. It's hard to prevent because it's human nature. It's really hard not to second-guess yourself sometimes. The habit to establish here, then, is simple. Make the issue fade away, literally, by remembering the acronym FADE, F-A-D-E, when you catch yourself second-guessing. It stands for Flawless Answers Don't Exist. It's true. There's no such thing as the perfect answer or solution. If you follow the problem-solving I, what you're likely second-guessing is some nuance of the solution you chose. Could it have been a little better, a little more optimized? Flawless answers don't exist. If you made the best decision with the information you had at the time, the only thing left to do is to move forward. So now you have the most common problem-solving mistakes mapped out on the mistake matrix. Apply self-awareness and the right preventative habits, and the map will help lead you to even greater problem-solving success. What's more frustrating than mistakes made during the problem-solving process? Obstacles in the way before you even start. Here are the 6 most common problem-solving obstacles. Great problem solvers make a habit of avoiding them. First, the wrong personnel. When it comes to problem solving, the output is only as good as the input. Having the wrong people solving the problem is a huge obstacle. The key is balance. You want a group that includes passionate, experienced veterans close to the situation, along with a few that offer fresh perspective. You want people with diverse backgrounds in general, but balanced with threads of commonality, like everyone at least knowing who the other person is. This is based on research from London Business School, which shows that too many differences across team members, without any common link whatsoever, like they're all strangers to one another, can negatively affect collaboration. The solve here can be as simple as engaging the team in initial getting to know you exercises. Regarding team size, the same research showed that collaboration bogs down once the group gets beyond about 20 people in size. Next, pressure from management. Sometimes upper management trying to help doesn't look like help at all, with a constant request for updates, distracting questions, or unhelpful suggestions. Key here is to cut this off as best as you can by setting realistic timelines and expectations up front that give you enough time to engage in the problem-solving I framework. It's also important to establish a line of communication with upper management with pre-agreed parameters to it. For example, you agree with management that your team will have a solution in 3 months, incorporating time for a disciplined process, which the seriousness of the problem requires, by the way. You establish that any questions or concerns can be discussed in a weekly update call that you've set up. Next up, resistance to change. When there's a desire to not change, to maintain the status quo as much as possible, that's a huge obstacle to problem solving. I have other entire courses in LinkedIn Learning focused on change and overcoming resistance to it. For now, I'll just share this. If you suspect resistance to change is in play, remind everyone of the change choice, which is this. Change can happen to you or for you. You can meekly address the problem with as little change as possible until you realize the problem isn't actually fixed and you're forced to change. In that case, change happens to you. Or you can lead the change, embracing it as a way to fully solve the problem on the table. In this way, you're making change happen for you. Another obstacle is lack of authority. You want to solve the problem, but you don't have the authority to decide on the solution. Well, that's okay. Even if you can't make the call, approaching problem solving in a disciplined fashion can still produce multiple solution options you can share with the decider, along with your recommended option. For example, let's say you work in HR, human resources, but you don't quite have the authority to decide how you'll improve employee retention. But you can present several well-thought-through options and your recommendation. Moving along, poor problem prioritization. If you're working multiple problems without prioritizing any of them, well, that's its own problem. Similar to the mistake matrix we covered earlier, you could prioritize problems to solve based on 2 parameters. How much of a negative impact will the problem have if left unsolved, and how difficult is it to solve? So, for example, a problem that's potentially very painful but is relatively easy to solve becomes your first priority. Finally, resource constraints. Not having enough people, money, or time to address big problems is clearly a big obstacle. It helps here to break that problem into individual parts to solve one at a time, and to stress the need for creative problem solving, like with the problem reframing technique discussed in a prior video. Key here is to be realistic about the constraints and operate within them as creatively as possible. Sometimes that's the only way forward in problem solving. It's also important to not just default to assuming you don't have enough resources. Sometimes it's a problem of resourcefulness, not resources. So, it's time to knock down the brick wall of obstacles. Problem-solving success lies on the other side. I asked 3,000 executives an eye-opening question. Thinking of the best problem solvers you've worked with, what characteristics did they embody? I'll explain why it was eye-opening shortly. First, know that with research like this, you expect some obvious themes to emerge. Sure enough, virtually everyone said creativity was a defining characteristic of great problem solvers, as was good decision-making. These are both obvious, so we're not going to go into those here. If you're interested, by the way, you can check out my LinkedIn Learning companion course to this course titled 10 Habits of Great Decision Makers. Now, here's the eye-opening part. After creativity and good decision-making, I expected a mixture of responses with no other themes emerging. Well, I was wrong. 88% of respondents listed the same 5 attributes, and in many cases, ranked them even higher than creativity. Here are those 5 characteristics captured in a handy, appropriate acronym. SOLVE. S-O-L-V-E. If you want to be a great problem solver, make a habit of checking yourself against these 5 attributes. Are you showing up as steadfast, optimistic, logical, village-minded, and empathetic? I'll explain each. First, steadfast. Great problem solvers are persistent. They know it takes hard work, commitment, and perseverance, even when the solution is elusive. They maintain a steady passion for solving the problem, knowing that the easiest solution is rarely the best solution. They keep everyone's energy and commitment up along the way. For example, one respondent described a leader charged with finding a solution for remaking the company's entire supply chain without ever disrupting customer service. It took a grueling 18 months to find a solution, during which the leader constantly encouraged the team as they went. Well, it worked. Problem solved, employees proud. Next, optimistic. Solving problems is hard enough. So great problem solvers approach it with optimism, a belief that everything is figure-outable, as author Marie Forleo says. In fact, optimism is often a self-fulfilling prophecy. Psychologist Richard Wiseman illustrated this in a really interesting piece of research involving 2 people, one who had an optimistic outlook, and one who was self-described as pessimistic and unlucky. He created 2 chance opportunities by placing money on a sidewalk and by placing a well-connected businessman in a coffee shop, ready to strike up a conversation. Now, the optimistic respondent spotted the money and picked it up, putting it in their pocket. Then they engaged in conversation with a well-connected businessman, which led to more positive outcomes. The second respondent, the one self-described as unlucky, stepped right over the money without seeing it and kept to herself in the coffee shop. Next up, logical. Great problem solvers logically analyze data, looking for patterns or inconsistencies. They see problems as puzzles to be solved. They don't get swayed by emotion. They stay objective, rational, and cool-headed. That's not to say logic limits the bigness of their thinking, passion, or excitement about an idea. They just don't let emotion or ego skew the way they see the problem or the solution. And that's also not to say dry logic replaces curiosity. Just the opposite. The 2 work together. Inquisitiveness and a willingness to try new ideas are coupled with reflection and sound implementation. Next in the SOLVE acronym, village-minded. Great problem solvers are very collaborative, knowing that it takes a village to solve a problem, a united, interdependent team with a clear mission. For example, one of the best problem solvers I ever worked with had a compelling tactic. In times of adversity that required intense problem solving, she'd start off every team meeting with the same sentence. Quote, "None of us working alone are stronger than everyone working together." End quote. Finally, empathetic. Solving a problem requires understanding the people affected by the problem and the solution. Great problem solvers take the time and show the interest to listen well, comprehend the nature of the problem, and relate so they can implement a thoughtful solution. So, make a habit to measure yourself against the SOLVE acronym, and you'll measure up to any challenge. One of the most fundamental skills to build at work and in life is the ability to solve problems. But by definition, it's not an easy thing to do. That's why building the right problem-solving habits is so important. It's like starting from a solid, reliable foundation or getting a jump start every time you have to tackle a challenge. And now, thanks to the mixture of habit-building science and problem-solving know-how that you have access to in this course, you can become a great problem solver. You can be the one everybody wants on their team because your habits help you adapt and overcome like few others can. So, go do like great problem solvers do, and you'll do extraordinary things in the face of challenges. By the way, check out all my courses on LinkedIn Learning and visit me at scottmouts.com to learn about my keynotes, workshops, trainings, and books.